Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Dr. Don Levy, director of the Siena Research Institute. Dr. Levy, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
The New York Times and Siena College have a new poll out on the New York City mayoral race. And the Democratic Party really had a shock upset back in June because the primary went the way it did, because the establishment Democrat, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, suffered a loss to New York State Assembly member Zohran Mamdani. He easily won that primary in a race that polling suggested months before was Cuomo's to lose. But Cuomo was still in the race as an independent, along with incumbent Mayor Eric Adams and Republican Curtis Sliwa, the founder of the Guardian Angels. So to start off the conversation, what is the state of the race now, less than 2 months from Election Day?
Well, it's quite a race in New York City. Right now, in a four-way race, our recent polling, we polled just under 1,300 likely voters in New York City, has Zohran Mamdani up by 22 points over his closest competitor, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who polls at 24%. So a 22-point advantage, certainly a very sizable lead. At this point, Mamdani is only sort of held in check by the fact that he hasn't quite gotten over 50% as yet. Current Mayor Adams polling only 9%, and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa at 15%. So clearly a sizable lead for Mamdani right now, and doing very well with a number of important voting groups. Young voters overwhelmingly favor Mamdani. Now, of course, that has to come with a bit of a caveat, because young voters oftentimes are the least likely to actually cast their ballot come November. But right now, Mamdani enjoying 73% support amongst voters 18 to 29 years old. That's overwhelming. In terms of looking at the various boroughs of New York City, Mamdani doing extremely well in Manhattan, Brooklyn, leading in Queens. The only places that Cuomo is doing well relative to Mamdani are the Bronx and in Staten Island. So right now, Mamdani is way ahead, you'd have to say. And the caveat in the race is who's actually either going to be on the ballot or still campaigning by the time we get to the November election.
And I think that's a huge question. And that was one of the big ifs you had when you were breaking down this poll initially. But aside from younger voters overwhelmingly going for Mamdani, what demos are more going for him? And then are the demos that are going for Sliwa the same demos that are going for Cuomo, the same demos that are going for Adams? Can you break down the demos a little more for us?
Sure. Highly educated voters also favoring Mamdani. The Republican vote, small as it is in New York City, certainly favoring Sliwa, with some support amongst Republicans for Adams and for Cuomo. Older voters is where the former governor has his greatest degree of support. So voters in New York City who are 65 years of age and older, tending towards looking at Andrew Cuomo as a viable candidate. We see that especially when we ask some character aspects of the candidates. One that especially stands out is who would be an effective mayor in New York City? Who would get the subways working? Who would pick up the trash? The nuts and bolts of being the mayor of New York City. There actually, amongst voters, Andrew Cuomo does slightly better than Zohran Mamdani. So a majority of voters think that Andrew Cuomo would be an effective mayor. They look back at his time as governor. He was an accomplished governor for quite a while. And Zohran Mamdani still with 53% feeling though he'd be effective, but a few points under where Andrew Cuomo is seen in terms of effectiveness. That's the best news when you look at the entire electorate for Andrew Cuomo.
I mean, looking at this race, it's just incredible the way it completely flipped on its head within the past couple of months. And I'm curious because Zohran Mamdani, until the Democratic primary, he was not a household name. Now he is. The entire nation is really talking about this race. He's leading Andrew Cuomo, who's number 2, by 22 points. What is making him, what about him or his platform is really resonating with New York City voters?
I think the first thing we'll talk about are some of the character traits. Does he care about people like you? Is he inspirational? Does he have good character? Those are all attributes that Zohran Mamdani is doing incredibly well. When you ask, is he inspirational? 62% of likely voters feel as though Zohran Mamdani is an inspirational figure. That's far greater than the number who say they're actually going to vote for him. So he has the that it factor, and I think he has run an effective campaign. He has been ever present across all of New York City. So people are seeing him as a young, vibrant, inspirational character. They find that he cares about people like them at the rate of 57%, that he has good character at the rate of 57%. Now, those are negatives for Andrew Cuomo. When you ask people in New York City about Andrew Cuomo's character, he gets a negative assessment. 58% say that they do not think he has good character. Only 39% think he does. And in terms of whether Andrew Cuomo is inspirational, again, a majority say he is not inspirational.
When I've talked to Cuomo voters, I hear a lot of the same messaging, the same rhetoric that I've heard talking to perhaps reluctant Trump voters of, I don't like his character. Some of the things he has done, I don't agree with, but I think that he'll be a better leader. I'm curious. A lot of the country has opinions on Mamdani. A lot of the country has opinions on this race. I know people think that they are inspired by Mamdani, but does anything give voters pause when it comes to Mamdani? Because critics have said, he has a light resume. He's young. That's great. But that also could perhaps show a lack of experience.
Well, sure. We asked voters whether they thought it would be good or bad for New York City to have a Democratic Socialist as mayor. Now, there, Mamdani's numbers fell a little bit. Only 37% of voters feel it would be good for New York to have someone who identifies as being a Democratic Socialist as the mayor, but it wasn't outweighed by those who feel it would be bad. That's 32%. So close to break even on whether Mamdani's ideology would be a detriment for New York City. And when we asked voters who did not support Mamdani why, the number one thing they said was not his character, which they said about Andrew Cuomo or Mayor Adams, but his ideology. So this idea that someone who is a Democratic Socialist, who has been called by some, including the president, as being a communist, does give pause to some New Yorkers. Is he going to get done what he says he's going to get done? Are there going to be free buses? Are there going to be free childcare? Is he going to address the housing problems in New York City? Well, 2/3 of voters say they don't think he's going to necessarily accomplish all that he has promised. Only about a third say they think that he can achieve what he says he's going to do. But still, when we say who's better on affordability, who's better on housing, who's better on those two really important issues, overwhelmingly voters think that Zohran Mamdani is going to be better on affordability, better at addressing the cost of living, better at addressing those issues than is Andrew Cuomo. Where does Andrew Cuomo at least have an opening? Absolutely on effectiveness. There, he's seen as slightly more probably effective than Zohran Mamdani. But the issue of crime, there they pull about even as to who would be a better mayor in addressing crime in New York City. And the voters who prefer either Adams, Cuomo, or Sliwa say that crime is the most important issue. The voters who prefer Mamdani say that the cost of living is the most important issue.
That's really interesting that it breaks down by issue there, because I've lived in New York now for almost a decade, and there's a joke that it costs about $40 if you leave your apartment every day because this city is so expensive. Rent is a huge concern. Crime is a huge concern because public transport is used by that's how you get around this city. So have you ever seen in another race where if my main issue is X, I'm supporting this person, if my main issue, regardless of demo, and if my main issue is Y, I'm supporting this candidate?
Sure, we've seen that before, and I think that's how these candidates are trying to differentiate themselves from one another in many ways. I think we've got to get to the big elephant in the room, though. That being the big if is this going to be a 4-person race, or could this possibly be a 2-person race? So when we polled that question, when we asked the voters who had said that they were not initially voting for either Cuomo or Mamdani, if the race was only between those two candidates, the two frontrunners, who would you then vote for? And in that scenario, Cuomo draws almost even with Mamdani. It turns from a 46-24 race to a 48-44 race. So if, and I think, the backstory on that is that voters who prefer Sliwa and or Adams overwhelmingly say, I would vote for Cuomo. They maybe said holding their nose, but that they would vote for Cuomo, not for Mamdani. Mamdani has a ceiling amongst New York City voters, and that ceiling is somewhere around the 50% mark. He was 46 in the first ask, 48 in this hypothetical head-to-head. He only gets over 50 if we pit him directly against Eric Adams. So can Cuomo succeed in somehow either seeing Adams leave the race, Sliwa leave the race, and to clear the field and have it be a two-person race? Then Cuomo draws close. And then the differentiation would be, as Cuomo was campaigning, I would be more effective. I've been an administrator. I've been governor of the state. I know how to get things done. He would accuse Mamdani of being inexperienced. And if your issue is crime, if your issue is public safety, if your issue is who's going to do a better job of working with the Trump administration, those are all areas where Cuomo scores points. If your issue is, I want change, I want something new, I want creative solutions to the cost of leaving your apartment every day, that's where voters are moving towards Mamdani. And right now, if indeed it stays a four-person race, he has a commanding lead.
And I know that when it's a four-person race, there's a 5% undecided or didn't say who they were voting for. If it winnows down to two people, if it's a head-to-head between Cuomo and Mamdani, how much does that undecided matter? Because I'm thinking about both candidates, and they are almost polar opposites here.
Yeah, absolutely. There are no undecideds when the ballots are counted. And the other variable is can you get some of those undecideds to come your way? The other question, though, is are people actually going to show up and vote? New York City elections historically have poor turnout. We've seen turnouts as low as 20%. It appears as though there's some energy here. Mamdani certainly has done a good job of getting voters who have not historically turned out to vote to back his candidacy. And so that may very well drive the vote up. Can Cuomo do the opposite of that? Can Cuomo say, you have to save New York from the Democratic Socialist, come out and turn out for Andrew Cuomo and to try to get those voters? It appears as though most of those folks already are being counted in our polling. The Mamdani seems to have a little bit of both a greater possibility to get new voters to turn out, but also a bit of a threat, because sometimes young voters who haven't sort of exercised that muscle of voting, may just not show up and vote on election day.
I know it's a big if the race goes from 4 to 2, and there's reporting that President Trump and his advisors are trying to make that happen, trying to get the race between Cuomo and Mamdani. There's even reporting that they were thinking of asking Mayor Eric Adams and Curtis Sliwa, trying to find a position for them in the Trump administration. But both have said that they're not dropping out. Mayor Eric Adams said this, quote, Andrew Cuomo is a snake and a liar. I am in this race, and I'm the only one that can beat Mamdani. Curtis Sliwa says he's the Republican Party candidate and, quote, the law and order candidate. Zohran Mamdani is Bill de Blasio on steroids, and Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, they're Mamdani light. So, A, what's the likelihood of this happening where both of them drop out according to what they said here? And B, if I'm a Curtis Sliwa voter, I know New York City is a very blue city, but if I'm a Republican, am I thinking, and if he drops out, am I thinking, he has a point here, Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, they're Mamdani light? Or am I thinking Cuomo, for me, is the best option compared to Mamdani?
Well, it's difficult to, predict exactly what's going to happen. There's another problem in that even if Adams and or Sliwa say, I'm out, they're still going to be on the ballot. Unless they leave New York City, unless they die, unless they're made a judge, they're still going to be on the ballot. So even if they say, don't vote for me, vote your conscience or vote, and they name someone, there's still going to be some of those voters who are going to vote for a candidate who has said they're going to drop out. Andrew Cuomo needs every single one of those votes. In our polling, he got 77% of Sliwa's vote. He got, coincidentally, 77% of Adams' vote. He didn't get it all. And that's what brought him from 24 up to 44. He needs every single one of those votes. He needs those people to drop out and to endorse them. And it's a long way to an endorsement from some of the quotes that you read. We've seen that before. I was against it till I was for it. It happens in politics. But some of those voters may not readily go along. So all that points to the difficulty that Cuomo faces in A, becoming the only challenger to Mamdani, and B, getting all those voters who he was not their first choice to vote for him in what actually would be as much an anti-Mamdani vote as it would potentially be a pro-Cuomo vote. There's still almost 60 days to the election. Things happen. We're going to wait and see exactly how active a role the Trump administration, the president himself, has. The latest comments seem to be that he's starting to become resolved to a democratic socialist, in his words, a communist, being the mayor of New York City. And no doubt there are members of the Republican Party who don't think that's a bad thing. If indeed they can use Mamdani as a straw man to run against in elections all over the country. So a tall order to see both Adams and Sliwa drop out. And actually, if only one drops out, let's say the rumors about Adams being granted an ambassadorship, perhaps to Saudi Arabia, let's say that were to come to pass, but Sliwa stays in the race. Our polling would indicate that that's not enough, even if Cuomo gets all of the Adams vote, for him to draw even with Mamdani at this point.
And if I'm Cuomo, my dream scenario is both Sliwa and Adams drop out today and give me just a colorful, glowing endorsement. Going from snake to I endorse this guy for mayor. It's a stretch, but we've seen crazier things happen in politics. So aside from the race becoming very competitive, if it's a head-to-head between Cuomo and Mamdani, what else are you looking out for in the next less than 60 days?
Well, we're looking at what other developments happen. Certainly, we've seen it's interesting that the crisis in Gaza is an issue in the New York City mayoral race, but it is. And now we actually are seeing more New Yorkers say that they feel as though Mamdani is doing a better job in expressing positions similar to theirs relative to the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. So if something happens there that turns voters one way or another, if indeed something were to happen to discredit Mamdani in some manner, shape, or form, he's so far demonstrated being a very skilled politician, but he is inexperienced, especially compared to Andrew Cuomo. Does he make a faux pas? Does something happen that turns voters away from him? So those are some of the things that we're looking at. We'll be back in the field in October. We can't wait to see what Mayor Adams and Curtis Sliwa's positions are 30 days from now. But the New York City race right now, strongly in favor of Mamdani, and it doesn't appear likely at this point that it'll be a straight two-way race. Those other candidates appear to be poised to be on the ballot. And right now, take them at their word, they're still in.
Well, we are certainly looking out for perhaps an October surprise, developments in the next 2 months on this race. And Dr. Don Levy, I appreciate you coming on. And when you guys poll next, I hope you can come back on and break it down with me. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.